Lawmakers have left town until November without making good on their promise to vote on banning stock trading. Leaders of the Democrat-controlled Congress previously promised a vote that would happen before they left, but later dropped their plans to hold that vote. Now one lawmaker is lashing out against her own party's leaders for dropping the ball. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more details.
House leadership said they'd vote on a bill this week to ban lawmakers from trading stock, but leadership has punted that vote just ahead of them leaving D.C. for over a month, and they haven't given a specific date as to when they'll take up this bill in the future. Now, the fact that leadership has delayed a vote on this has drawn backlash from a Democrat member in Congress, Representative Spanberger. She's now calling for new leadership. Spanberger said in a statement this morning, "This moment marks a failure of House leadership, and it's yet another example of why I believe that the Democratic Party needs new leaders in the halls of Capitol Hill, as I have long made known." So how is leadership responding to this criticism? Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi earlier today.
Well, we have to have the votes to bring it up.
You don't think you have the votes?
Well, we'll see. We'll work to have the vote. We don't go from one day to the next.
House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer says he delayed the vote on this because the text was just released on Tuesday and members did not have enough time to review it. But Representative Spanberger is not convinced, saying that this bill was designed to fail, saying that this is a kitchen sink bill and it's not a genuine effort on the part of House leadership to prevent financial conflicts of interest among lawmakers. She says that pretty much they're trying to create the illusion here that House leadership is pursuing this path while not taking any concrete action on it. And House Speaker Pelosi today did not say when leadership would bring this issue up again or if they even would at all once lawmakers do come back in November. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
OpenTheBooks.com is a government watchdog keeping tabs on a variety of people and entities in the United States government via Freedom of Information Act requests, otherwise known as FOIA requests. Their latest project involved tracking financial information tied to the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Founder and CEO of OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski, joins us to discuss. Adam Andrzejewski, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
Adam, OpenTheBooks.com has yet again done some digging through Freedom of Information requests, this time pertaining to Dr. Anthony Fauci. Tell us what you found.
While millions of Americans were suffering under Fauci's pandemic policies, we found that Dr. Fauci personally did very well. In fact, his personal investment portfolio soared and his net worth soared, as did his income and other outside income opportunities during the pandemic. So his net worth went from $7.6 million on January 1st of 2019 all the way up to $12.6 million at the end of 2021. It was a $5 million increase to his net worth.
It sounds substantial. From your research and experience, is this a special case compared to other government officials?
Well, I think so. I mean, what other government official has a cash investment portfolio of $12.6 million? There was essentially three drivers to his soaring net worth. Number one, his federal employment alongside that of his wife. Here's what the record shows. Dr. Fauci out-earns the president. Mrs. Fauci, Christine Grady, she's the chief bioethicist at Fauci's employer, the National Institutes of Health. She out-earned the vice president. If you take both of their salaries, add them together, and tack on 30% for the cost of federal benefits, at taxpayer cost every year, this power couple cleans off more than $900,000. The second driver was Fauci's outside income and the big cash prizes that he collected. He gets at least $100,000 by editing a medical journal from the book publisher McGraw-Hill. But that paled in comparison to the over $919,000 that he collected on large cash prizes. The third driver was his unrealized investment gains from that massive cash portfolio that he owned. So he had almost between $900,000 and $1 million of gains on that portfolio just last year.
Wow, it's incredible stuff. Just switching gears just a slight bit here. We've seen elected officials or their spouses making some significant trades in the stock market before significant legislation passes. Is this a concerning trend to you?
In terms of the investment portfolio, what our auditors found was that Dr. Fauci and his wife, they're invested in a broad array of mutual funds in the stock market, mutual funds in the bond market. They're not owning individual issues. So there's a difference there between Fauci's investments and that's what, and investigations into members of Congress. Fauci, on this basis, on his disclosed portfolio, he's playing it clean.
What other projects do you have going on? Anything you'd like to share with us that's on the horizon?
So at openthebooks.com, we took Governor Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, his campaign donor disclosures versus the state vendor list. And we found he solicited 1,000 state vendors for over $10.6 million worth of campaign cash. Those vendors just last year in state payments received $6.2 billion.
Always fascinating to speak with you. Adam Andrzejewski, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The White House has come up with their estimate of the cost of canceling federal student loans. They say it will cost $379 billion in total, or $30 billion per year over the next decade. This estimate roughly aligns with an analysis last week by the Congressional Budget Office. They put the cost at $400 billion. But the plan to cancel student debt is facing continued backlash. On Thursday, 6 states sued President Biden and the Education Secretary over the plan. These states say the plan to cancel student debt is an unlawful and arbitrary action. On that same day, the Education Department changed its guidance and scaled back eligibility for the plan. Now, if someone has student loans held by private lenders that are not yet consolidated federally, they are not eligible for the debt relief. An administration official says the change will impact around 770,000 people. President Biden's plan to cancel federal student loans will impact millions of Americans, not just those who took out the loans, but also those who will be footing the bill. There are already 3 lawsuits against the plan, and here to discuss the legality of the loan forgiveness, we have Giancarlo Canaparo, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Giancarlo Canaparo, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The Biden administration caused quite a stir when it said that it would cancel student loan debt for millions of Americans. Where do you think this policy went wrong?
Boy, it went wrong from the very start. Number one, the president is trying to use an emergency powers provision that was created to give temporary relief to soldiers fighting abroad after 9/11. He's pinned this to the COVID-19 emergency. Although he has just said we are no longer in a pandemic, he has taken different positions as it has suited his political preferences at the time. He has not promulgated any sort of formal agency action, not a rule, not a regulation, not a notice. He's doing this through a White House press release. It's government by White House press release. It is really an abuse of emergency power. And of course, everyone knows this isn't tied to the pandemic at all. This is a political gift that people on the left have been clamoring for since 2011, and Biden has finally delivered. And that's what this is about. It's politics, and the administration is pretending that it is necessary for the pandemic, but it just isn't.
Now, the administration is being sued over this by 6 attorneys generals. Where do you see this going?
So this suit has some legs, I think. One of the big challenges in this case is not the question of is it unlawful? It almost certainly is, and Biden seems to know that. The question is who actually has standing to sue? And standing is a legal doctrine that says you don't get into court unless you have a real injury that was caused by the person you're suing and that the court can fix. In this case, the states actually have some very good arguments. Many states operate as loan servicers to federal debt, which means that every time the Biden administration changes these programs or forgives some debt, they lose money. And that money is invested in the states through bond programs and other sort of financial incentive structures. So the states will suffer a concrete harm on account of this, and that is a very strong argument that they get into the courthouse doors. Once they're through the doors, there's really no debate that this will fall if a court gets to the merits.
We're seeing that the Biden administration has changed the rules already, excluding a segment of folks that were previously included. Why do you think that is?
Right. Politics again. So if only to prove that this has nothing to do with the pandemic, the moment that the Biden administration noticed that there were some people who might get into court, it stopped or said that it won't forgive many kinds or a certain segment of loans because it thinks that it will help them defeat the challengers, keep the challengers out of court. Incidentally, it won't. The harms that the states suffer don't depend on the government forgiving what are called FFELP loans. They suffer a harm regardless. So it's an attempt by the Biden administration to keep the states out of court, but it's not going to work, is my sense.
Do you think that this maybe raises the issue of tuition costs in general, because the universities know that it's essentially a monopoly mixed in with a lot of federal funding?
Right, you're exactly right. This will cause massive inflationary pressures on the prices of college tuition. And like you said, colleges know that as long as the government is insuring these loans, the government will write blank checks. The schools can charge tuition as high as they want, and there is no check on this system, no market participant in this system who says, maybe we shouldn't pay that much, because the government doesn't care. It will write a blank check, and the colleges know it.
Giancarlo Canaparo, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Lawmakers passed a bill that exposes the Chinese Communist regime's persecution and propaganda tactics that target people of faith.
The Chinese Communist Party is waging war against all faiths: Christians, Falun Gong, Tibetan Buddhists, Muslims, the Uyghurs.
The bill, called Combating the Persecution of Christians in China Act, sheds light on the regime's efforts to suppress freedom of faith in China. It specifically notes that the Chinese regime proactively works to undermine religions through raiding churches, forcing churches to replace images of Jesus Christ or the Virgin Mary with pictures of President Xi Jinping. Furthermore, China is rewriting the Bible to issue a new version with the, quote, correct understanding that accords with the Chinese Communist Party. The bill also points out the Chinese regime's propaganda tactics to target and suppress people of faith. The bill reads, quote, according to the Department of State's International Religious Freedom Reports, the Chinese government has imprisoned thousands of individuals of all faiths for practicing their religious beliefs and often labels them as cults. This type of propaganda has been one of the CCP's main tactics, though unsuccessful, to try to silence and suppress practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice rooted in the belief of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. And a former National Security Agency employee was arrested on Wednesday on espionage-related charges. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 30-year-old Jared Delkey is accused of trying to sell U.S. secrets to an undercover FBI agent who he believed was a representative of a foreign government. The Colorado man worked as an information system security designer for less than a month. He left in early July, citing a situation with his family, and reportedly began corresponding with the undercover agent weeks later. Delkey made his first appearance in court Thursday. Convictions under the Espionage Act carry sentences of up to life in prison or a potential death sentence.